Father, we just thank you, for who you are and what you've done for us. We come to you today, to worship you, to hopefully learn something new, and somehow, how we can continue your legacy both today and tomorrow. We look forward to the presentation that we have today, and just want to thank you for your son and his, giving his life for us. In Jesus' name we pray. I do want to introduce Justin and Pamela from the Texas Methodist Foundation. They brought a lot of information, and so hopefully if you have questions, feel free to ask it. If you haven't signed up, there is a sign-up sheet in the back. And please take some donuts and coffee with you before you go.
Great. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here and sharing your time with us. I'm Justin Gould. I'm the Chief Philanthropy Officer at Texas Methodist Foundation, and I'm in my 12th year at TMF. Live in Austin. I have a wife and 2 kids. My oldest son, Carson, is a senior in high school, so we're in that college search process for the first time, and it's actually been pretty joyful. Not too many. He's a great kid and a good student, so he's got good options. And I have a daughter, Parker, who's a freshman in high school, and my wife, Stacy, also, she works full-time too. But we're glad to be here with you. Prior to TMF, I spent about 10 years in higher ed fundraising, so I've got to bring a little more than 20 some odd years of fundraising experience to you, and just glad to be here. We'll talk a little bit about TMF here in a minute, but before we get there, I want to let Pamela take an opportunity to introduce herself as well.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Pamela Gray. I'm the Director of Philanthropy for Gift Planning at Texas Methodist Foundation. I've been at the foundation for about a year and a half. I most recently came from Northern Kentucky, from Florence, Kentucky, where I was the National Director of Philanthropy for Disabled American Veterans. I've worked for higher educational institutions like Rice University and the University of Kentucky. I've also worked for the Alzheimer's Association, Boys and Girls Clubs of America, and the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. And odd things like the Cattlemen's Association and some of that. It's my second stint in Texas. I am married with a 6-year-old at home and 2 kitties and 2 puppies, as we have been discussing. So I'm glad that you all are here, and just wanted to apologize. We will send the presentation out through PDF to everyone who makes sure that they get signed in and give us an email address. Our aspect ratios just aren't measured up, so you can see parts of the slides.
Yes.
Okay.
So our program today is called Your Generosity Matters, and we're really here to introduce some ways in which you can express your love for the church through your charitable giving and things that may not be top of mind necessarily about how to give and what to give. And so broadly speaking, that's how we'll spend our time today. Does everyone have a packet of information? There's some really good booklets that we tried to make sure everyone has one, but these tools are to help you put in place, begin to document the things that you want to share. That's really the purpose of the packets. But a little bit about Texas Methodist Foundation. So we started in the 1930s. We are an independent 501c3, so we are not wed to any conference or any denomination. Our mission is to empower the church. That is literally our mission statement. So in the church writ large, we want good ministry happening in communities across Texas and New Mexico. And we do that through helping resource churches and nonprofits. And so we have about $700 million in assets under management. About 180 of that is charitable assets. So people have given those resources to TMF for good ministry to happen across those 2 states. And we operate in what we call a cycle of generosity. And Acton is actually a participant in this cycle of generosity, where Acton is an investment partner with TMF. So your assets, the church's assets, are invested at TMF. We use those resources to support your ministry, but a portion of those assets are invested in what are called impact certificates. And those impact certificates are what we use to lend to churches for their construction projects. So in addition to all the charitable work we do, we actually function as a bank as well. And churches and nonprofits can borrow money And we have the expertise to help churches. A lot of times local banks won't want to lend money to churches, and we have a real knowledge base within our staff to help those loans to be done well, with competence, with integrity, with servanthood, all the things that underscore our commitment to the mission. And so the cycle of generosity for us begins with investing. Those investments give us the capital to borrow. We live off the difference, and the difference is how all of that gets reinvested in the church through hiring folks like Pamela, myself. We have a 10-member team on our philanthropy team, so there are other people on our staff that do what we do. We just happen to be the ones here today sharing our time with you, and so thank you for being here. So the lending and the giving piece, I failed to mention, we have a grants ministry. So each year, 2 times a year, churches and nonprofits can apply to TMF for grant funding. And we distribute anywhere from $2.5 to $3 million total each year through that grant process. And so these are resources available through that application process to help that church actualize its vision for the community through the church. And the learning piece up there, if you can read that, that's kind of another component of our cycle. For nearly 20 years, we have been investing in clergy growth and development. We invite clergy to participate in small peer learning groups called cohorts. And those leaders are often put into groups based on the types of churches they serve, where they serve, so that they can have a peer network that they can challenge each other and learn from one another. So we convene them and we facilitate those conversations, but it's their independent work that allows them to learn and grow as leaders. Big part of our ministry. So as investment partners, you are helping participate in a cycle of generosity that really gets reinvested in churches and leaders all across the 2 states. So thank you.
And just to mention, in some of your materials, a lot of those materials that we've given you are takeaways, but our current impact certificate rates, which are similar to certificates of deposit at like a regular bank, that information is in your packet, as well as information about who we are and what we do. So what are we going to do today? The very first thing, I'm going to touch on your estate planning, your personal estate planning kit, which we've given you 2 booklets, a lesson book and a record book. It's your homework. You can go home and work through this at your leisure. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. We're going to go through sort of what is the philanthropy picture, the giving picture, the generosity picture in the United States, and talk a little bit about what's going on in that space to give you a big picture and why we're doing so many of these seminars all over the state of Texas and in New Mexico as well. We're going to talk a brief moment about legislation that drives giving and philanthropy in the United States. Then we're going to talk about what to give, how to give it, and relate that to passing on your assets to the next generation. So that's sort of our overall picture. We're going to talk about like how you can impact and what an endowment is at the very end. And you've got information about that in your packet as well, specifically related to acting. So we used to do these same seminars. They were called Putting Your House in Order, and it really focused on, sort of your generosity story, getting your information put together to take to your estate planning attorney, to think a little bit about what you would like to do for the church as well as you're planning for your estate. In the record book and lesson book, you'll note the lesson book really walks you through all those things: durable power of attorney, estate planning, charitable trust, all that good stuff. Asks you those questions and talks about that piece. We also have those same booklets are downloadable from our gift planning website at Texas Methodist Foundation, .planmygift.org. And so that tool you can also get electronically to send to family members. If you've got children who really need to think about making sure they get their will done. Because It's going down. Only 48% of people in the United States have a will these days. It's, yes, it keeps getting less and
You
less.
can say that again.
You can say that again. It's going down, and I think part of that is just the education around when to plan and what to plan for. We do some of the seminars for younger families, so to think about, if you've got young children, what do you need to, why do you need a will, right? All that good stuff. So those booklets are for you to take home. The one piece that we encourage outside of that is to sit down and think about how to communicate this with your family members or friends that might be serving as your executor or need to know where your information is if something should happen. As part of that, we encourage you to think about writing a letter to your loved ones, talking about why you're doing what you're doing in your estate plan. I don't know if you were like me, but I always heard the nightmare stories that my parents said about when their parents passed away. They didn't know what was happening or why it was happening, and it caused rifts in the family. And that's one thing we encourage you to think about. Tell your generosity story. Think about what prompted you to be generous for the very first time. Me, it was my dad gave me $1 every Sunday at church to put in the collection plate. So that was sort of that transactional piece, but it sticks with you for a very long time. And then the other thing, because the pastor's not here, because he's over there, it's really important to sit down with your pastor and talk about those plans. What's your favorite music that you like to play? How would you like your funeral what would you like that to be like? Because I will tell you, when your loved one is faced with grief and then having to try to think about the things that you would like to have done for your funerals and things, it really helps to have that conversation and have that information with your pastor, with your church, as you go forward, because it just makes it a lot easier for the people that are left behind. And the biggest thing on this slide is to complete those workbooks and make sure that you take action. Get your estate plan done, double check those beneficiary designations, all that good stuff.
Just to piggyback there, so part of our ministry at TMF is to help you do that. That's part of why we're here. But as you work through these books and other tools that you have, know that Pamela and myself and members of my team are here to help answer questions as you work through that process. That's how we show up for you guys. And so to the degree that it's done anonymously, so you can call and say, hey, I'm just wondering about this. I don't want to share anything yet. We'll keep that in confidence. There's no obligation. There's no fees for any of that. It's part of our ministry back to the church. Yes, ma'am?
Do we have your contact information?
So the question was, do we have your contact information? Right, we have cards on the back table for each of us. Feel free to grab one. And then we'll send out the slide decks, as Pamela mentioned, and in that slide deck, we will, on that kind of first or second slide, I think we have information, but yes. Thank you. Okay, sorry. I'll jump in, yeah. So philanthropy in the United States, this is just a broad overview to say that the landscape is vast philanthropically. America is very, very generous. $557 billion in 2023 was given to charity. So that includes roughly 1.8 million nonprofits and another 300,000 churches. So the piece we want to highlight in this slide is, it says 8% bequests, 19% foundations, and 67% individuals. The truth is, all of that except the corporation comes from individuals and families. So individuals and families create foundations, or they create funds at community foundations. Bequests are provided by individuals when they pass away. And so the bulk of this charitable giving, and the most generous group are folks who make $100,000 and less, that they do contribute to charity. They are incredibly generous. So any media you may have heard about these incredible gifts that come from very wealthy people. That is all true, but undergirding all of that is the spirit of generosity that lives within each of us to support the churches and the nonprofits that we love. So giving to religion. Religion is still the biggest beneficiary each and every year of our charity. You can see right there that roughly a quarter of all of that, of the billions of dollars that goes to charity is given to church and religious causes. And so that is still fundamental to who we are as a country and important. You can see all the other dots, but far and away, religion is still the largest beneficiary.
And I think just to emphasize that this really shows all the competition that's out there. Religion used to be in the 1990s, almost, what was it? It was not quite 50%, but it was in the 40 percentile range. I believe 42% in 1990, 92-ish. So even though it's shrinking on the religious side, religious organizations are fulfilling in human services and education with pre-K and things like that. So it crosses over, but it's really, there's a huge bunch of competition out there for these dollars. And it's really leveling out. And $145 billion, it's nothing to sneeze at for 340-some thousand religious organizations in the United States. So it's just interesting. This is all, we didn't say, this is all because what is happening right now is the largest transfer of wealth that will happen in the history of our country. So somewhere between 45 and 80 billion dollars. Trillion dollars, thank you, trillion, will transfer from one generation to the next.
Our goal is to help charity be part of that transfer of wealth.
Yeah.
And for churches to be equipped to ask and invite those gifts. So legislation on philanthropy, we're not going to dive into the weeds on legislation, I promise. The left side of this deck that you can't see gives the names, but really this is to point out that since 2017, there have been a number of pieces of legislation that have passed that impact the way people give. And so this is just an invitation to pay attention to how that might happen moving forward. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is a perfect example. So at the end of this year, one of the key components of that piece of legislation will sunset. And that big piece is the federal estate tax. So for almost 99% of the country, the federal estate tax is not something we need to worry about right now. It's roughly $14 million per person or $28 million per couple. That number will sunset back to the $5 to $6 million range per person. So a big change. So if you have, so real estate, appreciated securities, so I invite you to pay attention to it. We're not going to get into the weeds, but it does create also different ways to give, like the qualified charitable distribution. We'll spend time later in the presentation talking about some of those acronyms you see up there so that you know what they mean. But this is just to point out that as Congress makes decisions about taxes, it usually ties to some of the charitable giving pieces. So. Greatest transfer of wealth in history. I just love this quote. One of our former board members, the transfer of wealth is happening. Some people will prefer to give during their lifetime right now, and some people will prefer to give after their lifetime because of their family situation. And so this quote says, you can't see it in its entirety, it says, I'm giving while I'm living, so I'm knowing where it's going. And so this donor just chose to really partner with churches and nonprofits during his lifetime so that he could experience the impact of his philanthropy. And so that may be the case for you, but it may not. It may be that after your lifetime is when your best gift comes.
So what to give? Many of us don't really know, but cash really is the most expensive gift to give to organizations you care about. Other things that are more tax-wise, more lucrative are appreciated securities. So highly appreciated assets If you transfer them to charity, there will be no capital gains tax that you will realize by doing that. And you can actually, we're going to talk about vehicles, tools that you can transfer appreciated securities in and actually pay you income for the rest of your life, or family or friends. Real estate is a big one. You can, that also, you won't have to pay that appreciation. I knew individuals who, like, if you talk about, if you're a farmer or rancher, my dad purchased our farm for $43,000. It's worth millions now. So things like that, so talking to individuals and thinking about ways to transfer them to the next generation, or to make them go a long way by supporting organizations you care about, that can be a really great gift. And then art and collectibles, and this is one of my stories when I first started out in the 90s. Got a call from, he's a rancher in Kansas, and he said, I have this aunt, and she just gifted me this painting by some guy named Monet. And in her will, and it's ugly, I don't want it. Can I give it to you guys? And it ended up being a six-figure, just under $1 million gift to the National MS Society. So you just never know what's going to turn up. And I talk about the things that we give. We also give our time, a lot of time. We give our talents, so the things that our collective experience to transfer on to others. And treasure, which everybody's asking us for our treasure on a daily basis, it seems these days. And the other thing is our testimony and our ties. So we share our generosity story with our family. We try to impart those values and those value statements on the next generation so they'll be carried on. So that's all part of what we give back, and all part of that sort of philanthropy and that ambiguity of philanthropy.
So what to give, or how to give, this is how to give, we just covered what to give. So gifts by will or living trust is what that top one says. These are some of the things we'll walk through. So just beneficiary designations are a really good way to include charity in your planning process. Gifts of IRA assets, life insurance, and bank accounts, qualified charitable distributions. We'll spend a little time going through each of these as how to give. And so, let's see, gifts by will or living trust. Still one of the best ways for individual families to consider including charity in their estate plan. And so you'll see up there that $42.6 billion was given through gifts by will in 2023, which was increasing. And so part of the reason Pamela referenced earlier that the number of people who have wills though it is declining, part of the reason is that the number of assets people have accumulated assets in retirement accounts in ways that they haven't done historically. And so those assets fall outside of the will, and so that beneficiary designation becomes an important part of the planning process. But gifts by will, I'm just going to read them because it is cut off. There's general bequest, specific bequest, residuary bequest, and contingent bequest. The big things with gifts by will is that your will get probated and it becomes public information. If you're comfortable with that, great way to give. You can edit your plans and they're revocable. So this is the reason people give through will, is that you can change your mind. So if a charity, you may have a plan in your 40s and then the plan changes in your 50s, and by the time you're in your 70s or 80s, the plan has changed again. Your resources have changed, the mission and the impact of the organizations you love has changed. You can go back and edit that in your will through codicils or rewriting it. But you can make general, specific, residuary, and contingency bequests based on what assets you want to give and how much you want to give. And so they're flexible and they're revocable, and that's a big part of why people choose to give through their will. The revocable living trust, if you desire anonymity around your assets, it's a really good way to protect that. You can, and they are also revocable, so there's flexibility around those living trusts. TMF will not draft trust agreements. We really do encourage you to have the right team of advisors around you, so that could be an attorney, could be a CPA, your wealth advisor. We encourage broad conversation to help you make your best gift. Let's see. So, quick story. Joanne Ranton is a really wonderful woman. She lives in Waxahachie. She unfortunately lost her husband and her son. They both predeceased her. But before James, her husband, passed away, they had put in plan an endowment agreement at TMF. And the assets, her entire estate, will come to TMF, fund that endowment, and the income from that endowment will go back to Waxahachie first, and it will go to the community of Waxahachie, other nonprofits in the community. So their goal was, one, to honor their love for Waxahachie and also to honor their son. And so their son, Jason, prior to his death, was a very talented organist, and he learned that love in the church in Waxahachie. He went on to teach at Baylor. And so they have a component of that endowment is to support the music ministry of the church. So you can create a fund that allocates different percentages through your will and that gift agreement that basically allows your goals to be accomplished from a charitable perspective. And so she's a lovely lady, lovely lady.
So gifts from beneficiary designation. So make sure that you have beneficiaries and contingent beneficiaries on all of your bank accounts, on all of your retirement accounts, on all of your life insurance. And I say this because I was doing one of these seminars up in Dallas, and the lady's like, yes, I've got my husband on everything. And I said, well, what if you and your husband are in a car? Have you thought about that? Oh, we're gonna have to go talk about that. And they hadn't put any contingencies in place if something happened to both of them at the same time. So that's just a little story. Life insurance policies, making sure that those are have beneficiary designations. Those also are transferred. All of these are transferred outside of your will or living trust. And the one thing I'll say with retirement plans, if you are putting multiple charities as a beneficiary designate, getting beneficiary designations like from that, it has the name and the tax ID number. If you want that to be designated in any way, make sure that you share that with the charity and have something, a purpose statement, an agreement with the charity or the church, so they know where to use that fund when it comes in. And so that we, organizations, can honor your wishes and make sure that money is used in the appropriate place. The qualified charitable distribution. If you are 70 and a half, you are eligible to give up to $108,000, split any way you would like, to charitable organizations on a yearly basis. Some individuals may think about their required minimum distribution and where they want to sit, and then give between that amount. But it's $108,000 is the cap on that, and that is per IRA. So if your husband and you, it would be $216,000 to charity. And I've worked with individuals who worked at, oil corporations or engineers or NASA when I was at Rice, and individuals could have $8 to $9 million in their IRAs because of that long-term piece. So they were holding most of their assets in their IRA. Yes, ma'am.
So it's my understanding, like, on an IRA, I have to pay tax at the end of the year on the gains that are for the IRA. But if I were to give my R&D to
Acton.
Acton.
then I would not have to pay tax on the gains that it had made during that year. Is that right?
It's not quite right, and I hesitate, because I'm not an attorney or a CPA, to give you guidance. What the qualified charitable distribution allows is to be, you can use it to exclude it from your income. So you pay taxes on your income each year. If you take a required minimum distribution and you receive that in your bank account, that will increase your adjusted gross income in that year,
Right.
which increases your taxes.
Right.
If you decide instead to give that required minimum distribution
Or a portion of.
as a qualified charitable distribution directly to the church, that amount never touches your adjusted gross
That's what I
income.
was trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is, to back up a couple slides, this conversation is all under the kind of purview of easy gifts. It is a really easy way to support the church or charity of your choice. There are two big things when you think about a qualified charitable distribution. One has to be sent directly from the sponsor to the charitable organization. If it touches your account,
Right.
it doesn't count. The other big thing is the money has to be in the charitable beneficiary's account before December 31st. So you can't make a qualified charitable distribution on December 30th, have the money come in the following year. That would be excluded, and so it wouldn't happen. So part of this is that it's a good planning to think about know what that RMD will be in the year and how you might use all or a portion of it to support your charitable. People, once you understand what that RMD looks like, people can really think about what a pledge to their church looks like. You can kind of use it to fund over a period of time what that long-term support might look like over a 2, 3, 5 year period. So really, really good.
Qualified charitable distribution is not related to, it's not, like if you took your RMD, but you still in that year wanted to give $108,000 to charity, you could do that.
Okay. So, if I decided to send the RMD to Acton, next year, then would I do that through you, or would I do that through, would I call Schwab and set that up?
Yeah,
or-
you would
So
do that through Schwab.
the question was,
Schwab.
how would that actually occur? That was the question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just, you would send that from Schwab, Fidelity, whomever your IRA provider is, you would have to tell them, hey, there's a form for qualified charitable distribution or IRA rollover, they call it in some areas, there'll be a form that you need to fill out. And in many cases, individuals look at that RMD and they'll say, oh, I'm supposed to take an RMD for X amount, but I want to be at this income level, so I've got $15,000 left, and they'll do that $15,000 to charity and stay within the right Medicare bracket. That's the other piece. That's the other piece that you have to watch.
So in your folder, there's a page called Ways to Give, and I'm building on your question about where does the money go. So Acton has an investment account, an endowment account, so to speak, at Texas Methodist Foundation. If you communicate to the church or to us that you want your qualified charitable distribution to be added directly to that account, we could receive that gift, but it goes for the benefit of the church. Or you can send it directly to church. They then send it to TMF. And so it's just a matter of process. Either way, we are a 501c3 public charity. The church is also an exempt organization. So that is technically, from an IRS perspective, it's a great gift. It is a great gift.
And the information is on the form for Acton. It's got the right tax ID numbers and all that good stuff. The one thing that I do encourage is definitely, if you're gonna have something sent from Schwab or Fidelity, whether it's coming directly to the church or directly to us and then being put into their account, make sure you call us and tell us it's coming. Because even though you say, for the benefit of this account at whatever, Schwab's gonna print out a check and it's probably not gonna say that on it.
Probably pretty generic.
So that it doesn't happen as much with Schwab, but I'll tell you from my experience, if you work with Fidelity, make sure you're telling the charity to expect that check and for what the amount might be.
One other thing, the reason these are great gifts, not only is the charity benefiting, but this is one of the most heavily taxed assets at your death that your family can inherit. And so if you want to leave resources to your family, this is not necessarily the best one to leave. So use this to support your charitable giving during your lifetime. Think holistically about what your other assets are that might be given directly to family, but these are heavily taxed upon receipt, transfer of death.
They can, and if you're transferring your IRA, it's inherited to say a child, they have to spend it down within 10 years. So if they're in their highest income earning years, that could really affect their annual income. So there are some other things we're gonna talk about that you could transfer that to alleviate that for families as well.
The half picture you can see is a picture of the King family in Amarillo. Charles was on the board at TMF for a number of years. He's an estate planning attorney, and he tries to do all of his annual giving through the QCD because it is excluded from income. So take this from the horse's mouth to get the estate planner who's like, okay, I start here. If I need to do more, we can. But he really does try to prioritize reducing the balance on his IRA, making those gifts to charity so that he's maximizing what's available in terms of the structure of the system. And they, in addition to Polk Street is the church they love and attend in Amarillo, they love to be responsive to natural disasters. So they use their QCDs to respond to hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires. Those are things that resonate with Charles and Jan. And so you can use this as long as that beneficiary is a 501c3 public charity. It's an eligible recipient. It's a great, easy way to make a gift to charity.
Oh, goodness.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
doing it again.
Maybe you can,
I'll get it.
okay. Any questions on QCD while we're, yes, sir.
My take is that you don't employ any attorneys to do all this work for you.
The question is, do we employ attorneys to do this work for us? And the answer is no. We have a general counsel, so if questions come up, we can review them with our general counsel. His name is Tom Stanton. But it's really up to the donor giving the proper instructions to their custodian of their IRA to ensure that the gift is done properly. We haven't talked about one of the gift vehicles yet. It's called a donor advised fund. You cannot contribute IRA assets into a donor advised fund, but otherwise, almost everything else is eligible. And so we have had to return gifts because someone said, I want to create a donor advised fund. They didn't tell us. They sent the check from their IRA account. We get it all, and we're like, I'm sorry, we can't do that. So a reminder that please ask your questions. We're here to be a resource to you. We can give you guidance and ask good questions. And then you can then take that information, the responses you get, and say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Family Attorney, how might I do this? Or your wealth manager, however your financial planner.
You have the ability to recommend viable attorneys.
We can build a list and share that list with you, and then you could interview them and say, okay, this one works best for us.
It's not sticking on, same for banks that work with you. You don't operate in banks.
Right, we are not the, so we're often not the custodian of an IRA. We do have some IRA accounts that are invested in our impact certificates, but we do not have necessarily recommended relationships with banks, right? So the question was, do we have recommendations on banks or sponsors of those IRA accounts, and we do not.
Charitable gift annuities. So charitable gift annuities, I don't know if anybody is familiar with them. But they,
Real quick,
yes, go ahead.
we're pivoting from easy gifts to gifts that pay you income during life.
Thank
So
you.
all of these next few gifts, you can use your resources to receive an income during your lifetime, and the remainder goes to the church, to charity. So that's the umbrella
Yes.
in a shift. Yes.
I'm awake. There we go. So charitable gift annuities are gifts that pay income, or I tend to say gifts that provide payments to you for the remainder of your life.
It's a good way to say it.
You and a loved one. It could be a sibling, it could be a friend, it could be somebody, it could basically be anybody. The charitable gift annuity, you put the gift into the charitable gift annuity based on the ages of the individuals that are gonna receive payments. There's a calculation, which you can play around with this on our website.
And we can give you a written illustration of all of this.
And then, so you make the gift of the assets. A lot of times the charitable gift annuity will take cash or appreciated securities.
Including mutual funds.
Including mutual funds. So you make that gift, it establishes the gift annuity, which is a simple contract between you and Texas Methodist Foundation. The reason why we go into this a little bit into more detail is because churches can't do all the registrations, or it's backed by our assets, where are upwards of $700 million. So if something should happen, you'll still receive those payments from life.
And if you live past your actuarial timeline, we continue to pay you.
Yes.
So,
Which is
which is one of the best ways to extend your life. Is to
right,
create your
is to do a gift annuity. I had a gentleman, and he, so adorable. He did 6 gift annuities with very appreciated securities that he would pull paper certificates out of his safe. And so he did these 6 gift annuities, and I said, you're gonna live an extra year of your life. He lived to be 106 years old. But he was him and his wife were so focused, they used those gift annuities to pay for their assisted living, to pay for their healthcare extensions, to pay for it. They figured it out to the penny and put all this appreciated assets into different gift annuities.
You avoid the capital gains tax when you give that appreciated security. If you sell it and then use it to fund your annuity, you have to pay capital gains on that. But if you give that to TMF, you exclude, capital gains tax is excluded. We then fund you for your lifetime, and then the gift comes to Acton at the end of your life.
Yes, and the premise is that during that time, you'll get a charitable deduction for the full amount of the gift that can be spread over the ensuing 5 years. And then the payments that come to you a portion of them will be tax-free, and a portion of them will be taxable, so it can reduce that taxable amount that you would receive. And then, we hope gift annuities are garnered by the American Council on Gift Annuities for all nonprofits in the United States. So everybody goes off the same. It's a very even playing field if organizations offer charitable gift annuities. So
the idea is that we're not, as charity, not competing on interest rate. We all just adopt universally what these recommended rates are.
Yep, and so that way, the premise is that you hope that at least 50% of that original gift will go back to charity. And it just depends on all of those pieces. If you live extra years, maybe not. Depends on how investments do over that time frame, all that good stuff.
So real quick on the immediate, deferred, and flexible.
Yes.
Immediate is you create the gift annuity now, we will immediately begin sending you payments. But say you are thinking about, you're not retired, but you want to retire in 3 years, but you have an asset, an appreciated asset that you want to give now for tax reasons, you can give that now and defer the first payment for 3 years until your retirement date. And so what that means is the payout rate, what we give back to you, will actually increase because we're not having to pay out for 3 years, it just gets invested. And so that number will go up, you will be 3 years older, but a really cool way to think about how you might increase your income during retirement. And then the flexible is kind of a flexible future date, similar in structure to the deferred, but you don't necessarily have to name the date at the time. One of the things that, another reason, like you said, we can talk about these all, they are great giving vehicles. So you may have, you can use it to support others. So one, we work with the Wesleyan in Georgetown, which is an assisted living facility. And there was a woman who was over 100, she had outlived her finances. A member of that community created a gift annuity at TMF to give her some additional income during her lifetime. Incredibly generous gift. You can use these, younger families can use these to support elder family members. So I could create a charitable gift annuity for my parents who were 77, and I could fund that with cash or appreciated securities to give them some additional flexibility with their finances in their latter years. So really, really great tools. Yes, ma'am.
This would be an annuity that is just starting, it would be an annuity you already have, you're already receiving payments for,
The,
and that TPA.
the question was, this would be a new annuity versus an existing annuity, is that right? Okay, so this would be a new annuity. You would enter in that, you would create an agreement with Texas Methodist Foundation to fund that with whatever asset you choose, and then you could immediately receive money or you could defer that. So it is a new gift, that's right. And so the tax deduction is tied to that original gift.
Yeah, and it's different than a commercial annuity. Commercial annuities, calculations are to try and spend that down to zero in your life expectancy. A charitable gift annuity, the premise is to spend 50% and then leave the remainder for the organization you want to care for.
One of the cool things is we've had this just 2 years ago. A woman during COVID created a charitable gift annuity with TMF, and a year later, her financial situation changed. She no longer needed that income. She basically we terminated the gift annuity, and she made an incredible gift to charity. So the named beneficiary got substantially more money because she canceled that gift annuity a year later. So you can change it, but that's the only thing you can change. You can terminate it, but it's a really, really good gift.
Yeah, and you can, I mean, as a grandparent, you could pay it out, or you could do a flexible annuity to pay out for 5 years during your grandchild's education to pay for books or help with tuition, all that good stuff, and then commute it to the charities of your choosing.
So the Newsoms are a sweet family. They're in Albuquerque at St. John's. Jack was a member of the New Mexico Foundation board. Texas Methodist Foundation and New Mexico Methodist Foundation merged in 2014. And so I got to know Jack after that merger. And they have a gift annuity that is named St. John's as the beneficiary of their account. Their son leads the food ministry at St. John's, and so they have directed the remainder to go to the food ministry, not to their son. They can't do that, but they can invest in the ministry that he leads. So just a really cool example of how they're providing resources in a kind of creative way to allow that food ministry to continue to thrive. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So charitable remainder unit trust, unit trust, charitable remainder annuity trust. Trusts usually are where you can put assets like real estate, or you're selling your business, you're retiring and you have a personally held business. You can sell that within a charitable trust. The charitable trust can then pay you income for the remainder of your life, or whomever you deem as the beneficiaries of that trust.
That Monette that Pamela referenced earlier,
Yeah.
that could have been placed in a trust. The painting would have been sold, funded the trust, and someone could have received income during their lifetime. So collectibles, personal property, can all be added to a trust.
Yep, and I had, so you can either do I should go through the little things. So you put money into a trust, you establish that trust. The trust documents or things of that nature have to be written by a qualified attorney that's used to do trusts. We might have some samples for them, but we only will serve as the manager of that trust or the custodian, trustee of that trust, and manage that. We will not draft the documents, but we can help you find somebody who knows how to do that. And then you establish the trust, and then it receives that tax deduction. Payments are then adjusted annually for the trust. The annuity, and you talk about there can be variable payments in what's called a CRUT, a charitable remainder unit trust. Those are revalued every year, sort of to determine what the payout will be. And then we have charitable remainder annuity trusts, and those will be a fixed payment for the remainder of the life of the beneficiary.
Like the gift annuity, the annuity trust will have the exact same annual payment to you. The CRUT, the CRUT, gets revalued each year because you can continue to add assets to it. So if you have multiple assets, but you want to claim the tax deduction for each asset in different years, you can add that over time to the trust so it gets revalued and your payment then changes based on that new value. So the annuity trust and the gift annuity, one gift, one time, static, but you know what the payment is for lifetime. The CRUT, because it gets revalued, is actually a nice way to hedge against inflation. So over time, the annuity, the gift annuity and the annuity trust may not keep pace with that with inflation, but the unit trust does help maintain a better balance between those.
And just for example, you could, sell your business or have some personally held securities or something that you want to divest, you put it in the trust. Then 10 years later, you're getting ready to downsize from your current residence into an assisted living. You could actually put your residence in that trust, sell it, and then increase your payments. Those types of things. So to think about those in different ways. Yes, sir.
Ma'am, did you have a question? No, okay.
Do you have to be a member of the Methodist Church to participate in this?
No, you do not.
No.
What was the question?
The question was, do you have to be a member of the Methodist Church to partner with us, to work with us on things like this? And the answer is no. We work with local community members all the time. Just happens that the church is usually the starting point.
Yeah. And we work with, like Justin, I think, alluded to, not all, United Methodist, Global Methodist, Anglican,
African Methodist Episcopal.
African Methodist Episcopal. So
That's-
we work with a variety of different denominations.
Right. So these are very technical gifts. Where you really want the right team around you. This is just to introduce you to the idea that depending on your assets, there may be some really creative ways to both provide income for you and your family and also support Acton or the church of your choice.
Yeah.
And again, we can help you. If you have questions, we can create illustrations. We can email them to you and say, oh, this is what this might actually look like from a financial perspective. We can give you all the details on those things.
Yeah, and we're, I think some of the most impactful gifts that I've ever worked with individuals to, make sure their siblings are taken care of. A lot of times I've done a couple trusts where it's been, my siblings need to be taken care of, or my parents, or whatever that looks like. We were sort of what we call that like triad. So it was you, your advisors, and an individual like Justin or myself that really can sort of bring our experience to bear and kind of listen and help you sort of discern where you would want to go with that type of gift.
The charitable lead trust. So in the previous slide, we talked about charitable remainder trust. This is a lead trust. So the remainder goes to charity in the previous examples. When you have a charitable lead trust, these are far less common. They were really common in the 1990s. But the idea here is that the charity is the lead beneficiary. The asset at the end then returns to the family. So it depends on, there's a lot of big factors, but you can use a charitable tool to leave assets to your family and support charity on the front end is kind of the basic concept we'd want you to know about.
Yeah, I think like if any of us wins the $100 million lottery,
Right.
this might be something we could think about doing to relieve our tax burden. So other tax-wise giving options. I think one of the most popular ones today is the donor advised fund. And Justin has a lot of really good stories around the donor advised fund. But basically, you can create your own foundation without creating your own foundation. So a donor advised fund is held by an entity like Texas Methodist Foundation. Some of you may have a donor advised fund with Schwab or Fidelity or Vanguard. But these then, you, the members of your donor advised funds that are in the agreement, can make grants to Acton and other charities that you deem appropriate. And you can kind of have a family giving conversation every year. And do you want to tell the story?
Sure. So donor advised fund, think about your own charitable giving account. You make a gift, you may have an appreciated asset, you want to use that asset to fund your giving for some extended period of time. A donor advised fund is a great tool. You just make recommendations to us. We then send the money to Acton or your alma mater or the Y or whomever. But it's a really, really good tool to invite the values-based conversation. Like, why is this important to me? So the Osley family, who you can see half of the picture of, Ravi is the bright white-haired woman on the left there, the red. Each Christmas, they invite their grandchildren to talk about the charities that are important to them, the grandchildren, and they get to recommend to Ravi and Tom what they want to do. And Ravi and Tom then make a gift from their donor advised fund to those charities that their grandchildren love. So it's a really cool way to kind of have that generational conversation around why things are important and what impact are you hoping to see and accomplish through the charities you choose. And so the Osleys aren't the only family that uses a donor advised fund that way. There are others that just don't want their story shared, and that's okay. The Snyder family, this is an interesting story. So the father was an ophthalmologist and developed some nice resources and decided to create a family foundation in the 90s. Family foundations require public reporting. You have to file what's called a 990 in the IRS, and the public knows exactly what the resources are in that family foundation each year. When the father passed, he named the children as the trustees of that foundation. The children didn't necessarily agree each year on what charity should be the beneficiary of that foundation's assets. So they dissolved the family foundation and created multiple donor advised funds, one for each child, so that then they could do whatever they wanted. One of the beauties of the donor advised fund is that they can be created and they can operate anonymously. So you can create a donor advised fund, call it whatever you want, and make grants to the charities of your choice, and the charity may never know that that's who created the donor advised fund and sent the money. So it just depends. Sometimes communities are real small and not everyone wants to share what their resources are. Donor advised fund is an incredible way to do your giving anonymously if you so choose. And so TMF would know, or a sponsoring organization would know, but it does, and the money goes out and it would just have the anonymous name attached to it, and the beneficiary really would have a hard time knowing what that was unless the donor told them. So
endowment, so Acton is setting up an endowment, has set up that fund to fund ministry here into the far future. And what an endowment is a permanent fund set aside from annual operating. And an endowment fund retains the corpus, and then based on the internal policies and procedures of your endowment, of your committee, a percentage of the annual interest income comes to the charity to fund ministry, however that endowment is set up. So just so that you know, that is the committee has gone through the process, and the information is on your ways to give form within your information. And you can also, and like Justin said, there's also an opportunity if there's something you want to specifically do and you have a larger amount of assets and you want to set up your own personal endowment to fund multiple organizations, there's an opportunity to do that as well.
So, yes, ma'am.
Did I understand you to say that the endowment principal stays, it's only the investment that can be said?
The question is, does the endowment principal stay and only the investment is spent? And so go ahead.
Yes, but based on your policies and procedures, most organizations, and I believe Acton has it in their policies, if there is an emergency, a supermajority of the members of the committee, board, whatever that looks like, can vote to go into that principle. But in most cases, the premise is that in a permanent endowment, you want to retain that corpus, and based on the percentage of interest that grows every year, then more of the interest income will be able to come to charity. So right now, I'm working with the church in Dickinson, and they're doing a endowment building campaign, and their goal is to get $1 million in that fund by the end of December. So they're sort of going through sort of a today piece, and then we're going to talk about gift planning and gifts to request later.
So part of the reality of everything we've shared today is we've talked about these as individual, independent tools that may support your charitable giving. Truth is, they can be combined to put that really good plan in place. I mentioned the Osleys earlier. They have the Donor Advised Fund. They've included in their bequest a specific bequest to be added to their Donor Advised Fund so that those family conversations and charitable giving can continue after they pass. So an outright gift from through their will be added to the Donor Advised Fund. Their children and grandchildren continue that legacy of giving. So you can put these pieces, these tools together in ways that really help you think about your current giving and your future giving.
We do have some resources we recommend. One of those is, it's called the Philanthropic Autobiography by Dr. Bill Enright. And we mentioned this is a great exercise. It's sort of to really think about how throughout your lifetime you've been impacted and have impacted others through generosity. And we recommend that could be like a catechism or, a book, Sunday school, whatever that looks like, exercise as well.
It leads you to that story, that personal story, that claim on why do I love the church? Why do I want to include it in my planning process? It helps build out those milestones throughout your life that lead you to a decision to include the church in your estate planning.
Spirituality of Fundraising by Henry Nouwen. This really talks to giving, generosity, and philanthropy as it's really it's our mission. It's the way that we share ourselves with you all. It's sort of that collective experience. Really, that philanthropy is generosity in and of itself, and what that looks like.
As members of the church, it's a way, it would be a tool to help you think about, to help you claim your love for the church and to express that through your relationships. And that fundraising is ministry. It's not like a beggar's model of we need this because, but there's really impact you want to see it.
Yeah.
Carrie Robinson, I'll piggyback, Imagining Abundance. Carrie it's a nice short book about both giving and receiving and what that balance of, what that look and feels like. So maybe another way of expressing what Dr. Enright was trying to accomplish through the autobiography.
And just so that for everybody's piece, we as philanthropy officers, people who work in the industry, we sort of we subscribe to a very, I am forgetting the word.
Code of ethics.
Yes, it's our code of ethics.
Yeah.
That we subscribe to when we work with all of you or with anyone in their plans. So to be confidential. Everything that we talk about is confidential. We hold that in confidence. All that good stuff.
The conversations are free of charge. There's no obligation. So just, some people wonder about that, but that's part of TMS ministry back to the church.
Any other questions or anything?
That's a lot. I'm gonna have to read this.
It is a lot. And just to introduce you, to stir some thinking about different ways you might give of your time, talents, and treasures.
Well, as a member of the Finance Committee, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming, taking your time. I know I learned a lot today. It was something I had to drink a couple of times, but I want to thank TMF for coming and sharing that with us. And, this is a way that we can continue our ministries and our missions here at Akron Methodist Church. So we hope to grow that endowment fund. So thanks again for coming.
Thank you all.